Good morning, everybody. So this is going to be pretty quick. I'm going to be gone the next 2 days. I hopefully have told you that already. But I just wanted to make sure I have a quick little video for you to watch, talk about what we're going to do. Remember, you've still got whoever is my sub is here, and Mr. Byler's here. He can absolutely help you out with any of this stuff. Uh, so today is going to be just about practicing what we learned on Wednesday. I want to go through a couple of examples just to kind of remind you what's going on, and then you're going to get a worksheet where you've got to do. It is quite a few of these, but you're going to have most of the time to work on this. And this is the kind of thing where just practicing it a lot really does help out quite a bit. So our goals today are just more practice with solving for sides specifically. So we'll go ahead and start with this one. I've just got 3 of these. Remember, these are the same steps I talked about yesterday, are identifying the sides, picking out our trig ratio, and writing the equation. 2 and 3 kind of go together for most of you. And then when we do these, we're going to cross multiply and solve, right? We're solving for a side. We're using the normal sine, cosine, tangent this time. And only after we solve do we get to touch our calculator. I've got my calculator off to the side here. I'll pull it in when I need it. But don't try to grab that calculator early. It is the very last step once you've already done all the math. So I look at this. My first step here is to identify my sides. And those are all based on the angle that I know. So this is the hypotenuse. And this one right next to it is the adjacent. To figure out my trig ratio or trig function, I'm going to think about which of my trig ratios have adjacent and hypotenuse. Maybe I even write down SOHCAHTOA. And I see, oh, adjacent hypotenuse. That one's cosine. So I'm going to write it out. Cosine of, I know my angle is 63. And cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So I'm going to have 23 over x. So I've written out my equation. The next step here is to cross multiply. I like to think of these as a proportion, and I cross multiply. Going this direction, I've got x times the cosine of 63, and I'm just going to leave it, x times cosine 63. Don't type anything into your calculator yet. Going the other direction, I've got 23 times 1, so that's just 23. And then this is the part that's new. You haven't seen this until yesterday. But when I'm going to solve this equation, I still want to get x by itself. So I'm dividing by the thing that is not the x. I'm dividing by cosine of 63. So that's my algebra. At this point, I have solved it. I know that x equals 23 divided by the cosine of 63. I can try to write that neatly. Sorry. Cosine of 63. Now I can type that into my calculator. This is the first step where I've touched my calculator. Everything else has just been algebra, doing the algebra on the paper by myself. All right, so I pull out my calculator, and I had 23 divided by the cosine of 63. And my calculator says 50.66, so I'm going to round that to 50.7 when I write that down. Okay, so it's 50.7. We're rounding it to the nearest tenth. So again, I identified my sides. I want to see them written down. I wrote my equation. I cross multiplied, and I solved before I typed anything in my calculator. So next one up, we're going to go ahead and do this 3 times. Identifying my sides. So there's my angle, which makes this one the opposite, and this one the hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse, if I remember, that's so. So I'm going to use sine. Sine of my angle. Right, this is normal sine. I put the angle in it. Is equal to the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. So I've written my equation. Identified sides, picked my ratio, wrote the equation. Now I'm going to solve. Cross multiply. 20 times sine of 40. Remember, in algebra, we don't really write a times symbol anymore. X times 1 is just x. And would you look at that? This is going to happen about half the time. It is already solved for me. I didn't have to do anything to solve it. All I need to do right now is just type that whole thing into my calculator and see what it says. Because I already have x by itself, I don't need to do anything there. So 20 times sine of 40. Go ahead and here, 20 times, I don't need to do it times, just 20 sine 40 gives me 12.85. And we're going to round that to 12.9. That's the work I want to see when you do this worksheet. I tried to give you plenty of room. Right? If you need a little bit more, feel free to grab a scratch piece of paper and just number them so I can see your work. The last one here, I'm trying to do one for each of these. We've got opposite over here. We've got adjacent over here. The hypotenuse is this one. We didn't use that one. I don't really care about it. I identified my sides. Opposite and adjacent, if I think about my SOHCAHTOA, is tangent. So tangent of 27 is the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. You'll start to notice pretty quick here when the x is on the top, that's going to be the easier type, because look at what happens when I cross multiply. 10 times tangent of 27 equals x times 1, which is just x, and it's already solved for me. I just have to type that into my calculator. So 10 times the tangent of 40 is 8.39, which we would round to 8.4. So, like I mentioned here, you'll notice this because you're going to be doing a lot of these. When the x is on the top, that's going to be the easier type. Down here we had, when we started out, the x was on the bottom. That's where we actually have to do that cross multiply, and then we're going to have to actually divide, because you're taking x times, in this case it was cosine of 63. You have to divide by cosine of 63 to get that answer. So if you start to get to the point, towards the end of this worksheet where you're, really getting this and you're doing them and you understand what's going on, I still want to see this equation written out, but you can start to kind of see the patterns that are happening here. I just really want to make sure that you're actually finding the right pattern before you start trying to take shortcuts. So today we've got 18 problems. If you look back through this video, you will notice all 3 of the problems I just did are questions from the worksheet. They're not the first 3, but you will find those exact answers in there. All of the answers are written at the bottom of the worksheet. You need to show the work. The only way I'm going to believe that you actually did this practice is if you show the work. I should see it just like I did on the examples. But check your answers. You get better at these things when you practice, but you have to practice it right. So tomorrow we're going to kind of put stuff together, kind of combine everything we did this week. But for today, you've got the practice worksheet with the answers at the bottom.